Honda is hosting next week.
Yeah, should be a form.
I don't know.
Test. We'd like that a little louder. It's like a little louder. Test. All righty. Okay. All right, folks, we're here tonight for the public hearing on the Shoreland zoning map changes and a couple other ordinance changes. And I will turn it over to the planning board to start their presentation on the slate.
Good afternoon and welcome to this public hearing. It is 6:03 p.m. Tuesday, August 25th, 2026, and we are meeting at the Pittsburgh Elementary School. The purpose of the hearing is for the planning board to present the proposed changes in various land use ordinances that will be on the voting agenda at the town meeting to be held in September. I'm Marie Varian, Chair of the Planning Board, and board members are Lori Follett, Potts, John Taunton.
Roger.
Your name, sir? Right. Yeah, Roger Clark. I have to kid him a little bit. Our assistant is Rachel Newberg. The board will introduce each item, explain its reason, and answer questions. If you wish to speak, raise your hand to be recognized and give your name before speaking. Speakers will be limited to 5 minutes. The first item to address is the proposed changes in the Shoreland zoning map. John Topman will describe these proposed changes and the reasons for them. John?
Good evening. Thank you for coming. There's a lot of you here. I guess a lot of interest in this. So this, the reason we are proposing this is or this was brought to our attention a couple of years ago. A couple of years ago, Lee Graney, the Codes Enforcement Officer or Fire Enforcement Officer, was meeting with Jeff College from the DEP in Parker Head at the subdivision that was being done over there. And at that point, it was brought up that they were clearing the land next to the river. Based on the shoreline zone rules, so they were using those shoreline zone rules, but the land was in resource protection. And according to our rules, our books, if it's in resource protection, basically you can't cut trees, anywhere. We don't know when the town, you look at the original map, that's the new map.
That's the move.
Yeah. But basically, most of the town has I'll call it a split zone, but it's really an overlay zone. You've got the shoreline zone and then the resource protection zone overlays on it on, for the most part, 125 feet, and it circles most of the town. The only exceptions are, the village districts, and there's a general development district up in, the Winnipeg's. So prior to this, we don't know the reasoning, but essentially the whole town has been allowed to cut using the shoreline zone rules up until this point. We didn't realize, the DEP didn't realize, no one knew that essentially we were illegally cutting according to our own rules, not necessarily the state rules, because we are actually more strict than the state on this. So it was brought to our attention that what are we gonna, we basically can't cut any trees in this resource protection zone throughout the whole town. So we then contacted Jeff Talmadge, and he came down and met with us. And basically he said it was a town issue, not a state issue, because we have all this resource protection land. And then we have way more land in resource protection than is than the state criteria says you have to have in land use. And so, or in resource protection. So we asked, what can we do to change that? And so the first thing he said was we had to map the town, find out what meets the criteria for resource protection in the town. And then, which also means what doesn't have to be in resource protection, we kind of do both. And then once we've done that, we could come up with a new map based on that. We had to send the map back to Jeff at the EP. He had to give conditional approval on that. And then from there, we would come to you through this town meeting, or public hearing. So you said we contacted a couple companies to map the town. Ended up going with Judy Colby George from Viewshed. And she came down and met with us. It was actually really interesting. She has been doing this for a number of towns from the state. And she showed us some of the preliminary work she was doing. I'm pretty sure it was Belmont. Belmont and Hartsville. And so there actually are a lot of more than, we thought there'd only be a few criteria for resource protection, but there's actually more than we realize. Some are lesser much. But essentially flood zones are big and slopes greater than 20% are big. That's the two major issues on the shoreline. Another decent sized one is the inland wading waterfowl is another one that hits a lot of the ponds, more specific. So needless to say, actually I got ahead of myself a little bit, but when we were talking to Jeff also, so we had to find out what was needed to be in resource protection. And then also, if the areas are technically supposed to be in resource protection, but are very developed already, they don't have to go in resource protection, or they can come out. And so that also is impacted in this map. It didn't make a lot of difference because a lot of the areas didn't matter. But there were some areas that were technically should be in resource protection, but we actually brought out of kept it out of resource protection because it was very developed. So to say, so we contacted this Judy, and she put the maps together. Brought them back to us, we went over the maps, the whole entire town, and just to look at what was, you know, what needed to be, what few places we took out. We left a bunch of places that could have came out, were left in because they were already conservation land, in the town. Maybe in terms of land trust or the state park or the basin. And so some of those things stayed in even though we technically could have come out. So once we got all that done, we then sent the map to Jeff at the part of DEP. And so he then went over the maps and came back with us with a conditional approval. We didn't get a full approval, basically we don't get a full approval because we have to see what happens between tonight and a town meeting and all that kind of stuff. And so, let's see. Yeah. So, yeah, so that's basically where we're at. We got to this point through them. And, so we, are now in the process of trying to get it, passed or figure out what the town wants to do. I do know there has been definitely a bunch of comments. I'll just try to stop some of this, but I'm sure it's still going to be worried. A lot of people think that this is going to create a lot more development. Effectively, all we're trying to do is to get back the ability to cut trees according to shoreland zone rules, which is basically what everyone thinks they're in because that's what everyone's been doing for until 2 years ago. We did have, to me, development really, what impact development is setbacks and where you can build. We're not changing setbacks. We completely talked about it. The town is, I would argue, very confusing on setbacks. The state mandates at least 75 feet on the ocean, and then I think it's 100 on great ponds. The town has 9 different setbacks from 50 to 100 to 125 to 150, 71, 175, 200, 250. It's confusing. So we did consider that, but we ultimately decided that we didn't want to tackle that at this point. We're just trying to get the cutting, allowing to cut so you can have a view to the water. Because technically right now, you're not supposed to. There are some exceptions and you can read in there. If you've been maintaining it for 2 years, you can keep maintaining it. But if you haven't cut in front of your house in the last 2 to 3 years, effectively you're supposed to leave it until it grows up again, if we don't change this. And so that's ultimately what we're trying to do. It's not changing. It's essentially it's just wording. It's not changing things. It's in effect that we're not changing setbacks. We're not changing use. We're just, by being in a non-resource section, you can cut according to the shoreline zone rules. So, and I guess that's in a nutshell. That's it in a nutshell. And there's going to be a lot of questions. And so 24 where we are. So, who's first?
Are you planning to take questions after each section?
Yeah, we're gonna do this first. See Roger.
Roger Arrow, West Point. So is this all about that subdivision? Does your characteristics of the editorial comment be found on part of the head?
Oh, sir, there's a microphone here. If you would like to make comment, you gotta do it at the microphone at the podium. I know, sorry.
You just picture.
They're running for Senate.
Yeah, would be, I mean,
Mike? Yeah, do that. My reasonably simple question is, has all this effort been for one group of subdivided houses? I think it's on Chimney Rock Road. Are those basically the only properties being impacted?
Absolutely not. That's the, again, the tip of the iceberg, that's what brought it to our attention, because this is that way. The town, literally the entire town is resource protection. That's what was figured out after it was put together. We don't know who or why it was allowed to be cut for all those years. It's clear in the books that in resource protection, you're not supposed to cut trees in resource protection. And it was allowed for years by both us and the code enforcement officer and the DEP. The members of the DEP have seen it for years. And I think, in my mind, I think they didn't realize that it was resource protection because it didn't meet their criteria as resource protection as it was in the state. But then once it was figured out, it impacted the whole town. Like no one in this town right now, according to our own rules, is supposed to cut inside of the resource protection areas.
Using the point system, right? There's a.
no,
Get volts out, they do all.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
I'll just add a little bit to that. If any of you have looked in the shoreline zone rules, section 15 on page 36. One, in a resource protection district, abutting a great pond, there shall be no cutting of vegetation within the strip of land extending 75 feet horizontal distance inland from the normal high water line, except to remove hazard trees. So that was the big niche here. There's a whole section here after that that explains each district and what you can actually cut in those districts. If you go down in there, the point system is what everybody used to use. I did myself when I used to cut wood. And it has that chart right in there, which you have to make boxes in that first 75 feet, that are 25 feet wide, 50 feet long, and you go from one of your property boundaries to the other. And you're allowed to take out so many trees and the rest have to be left. The only way in the last couple of years that you could do anything is it had to be a hazard tree. You had to hire an arborist or a licensed forester to come in to deem that that tree was a hazard tree. And then you had to go to the code enforcement officer once you had that paperwork deeming that, so that the code enforcement officer would know and he would also allow it. So that's what the majority of these changes are all about. If you look in any of the paperwork, you don't see where we're changing anything in section 12 or in section 15, which is what determines all of the setbacks. We're not asking for any changes in any of those, so it doesn't change anything.
I just want to be clear, my name is Peter Blatchley. What you just outlined is, when Lee Rainey came out and talked to me about what we could do at Brightwater, I was not allowed to cut anything within 75 feet of the, nothing. And so I'm just wondering, you said that we've been cutting basically at the DEP level of rules, but not at the resource protection rules for all this time, because that's not consistent with my own experience. I'll have some comments later too, but.
How long was it?
How long ago? Oh, that was probably 10, 12 years. Maybe more.
Was by a different DEP person.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that would, honestly, I'm reporting that one, so I'm not sure what he was implying at that point. I just know that if it's in resource protection, and maybe that's what it was in that area, we didn't allow it at that point. Yeah, I honestly don't know the real answer to that one. Yeah, that's the. Why do the rule? That's
He's
just,
retired.
I know, it's not here.
It's still at, but look,
Yeah, it's the last. You
not there.
got two.
One second.
Hi, Derek Ox. We did a lot of cutting in town, both sides of town for people, with the point system. In which we would always mark it out and put it on paper and heavily approve it, and, if it was that, well, actually, he came and saw me, one day when we were doing some. And it was at Chimney Rock, and he said, well, I'm sorry, I've gotta tell you, the DEP enforcement officer has changed over, and the new one has brought it to my attention that we're not allowed to do this point system anymore, and that we're not gonna be able to do this anywhere as resource protection. And we have had many people from both sides of town that have wanted to cut their trees legally and properly, and I've had to tell them, I'm sorry, we can't do it. And some of them didn't understand because their neighbors had done it, and we'd done it for their neighbor, but that was in the time when the town was overlooking it. And so I just wanna make it very clear, it's not about any one person, it's about everybody's property in town. And anybody who hasn't done any maintenance in front of their house that they can see on the old map, they're in resource protection, you're not allowed to. You have to let it grow in so you can't see the water. And so it's important we get this changed, and Lee said that he did want it changed and it should be fixed, and I believe he urged to make that happen. And so, I do believe it should happen.
Hi there, thanks. I just had a quick question because, I'm sorry, my name is David Ferguson, over by the basin. But I was looking at the map, and, you know, that map, you can't really tell much, but you can, when you zoom in on it, you know, you can see that there's still like some green areas, which are resource protection, and then yellow is behind it. So I was just trying to figure out, like, what exactly does that mean? Like, even in the basin, you can see like, well, there's a little spot here, a little spot here, but then not here, and so does that mean you can't, you know, I'm not sure how that applies, but then also the other thing is, you know, so we're just saying this is mainly a technicality, that, you know, what's been done, the new residential proposal is kind of what's been, the way it's been, what people have been doing, even though it was a different color. Is that kind of what the gist of this is? Like, nothing's really changing at all, it's just color.
You're right, that's what we're trying to accomplish, is to basically make it be what it was, or what people thought it was for up until now. And I'll back up to the first question, sorry. The first question, when they did the mapping, which the first criteria I said was the flood zone. If you're in the flood zone, and it can be just a sliver of the front of the property, that had to stay, be resource protection, and it stays resource protection. So it is going to be a difficult one. I'm in the same boat that this is. It's weird in some of the places. If you actually look really close, and we've been through this a bunch. Like I know one of the areas in Cox's Head, it has this sliver. Well, it's below the high water line. And some of that literally is very water's edge, where there's some, where it's not, where it's resource protection, and the state basically said, no, you can't take that out. And so that's why the map looks, with those little slivers in certain areas, those are, we can't, they won't allow us to change that. Everything else, they've so far been good. So.
Hi. Now is it working? I got a hold of it. I'm Jim Loney from over in Brightwater. First off, you guys have been serving the town for a long time, and you're the gatekeepers, and you know way more about this than all of us. And from the conversations I've had, mostly everybody is concerned because this is all unexpected, and looks like we might have to vote on it in a few weeks. and we want more time, is what we're asking. I'm not accusing anybody of anything, and I'm trying to understand. I've been studying on this code, but my understanding from reading it, and I thought this is what I got from speaking to Jeff at DEP, is that the areas that the state mandates are in resource protection, they mandate a minimum of 75 feet.
Yes.
So if you're saying there's a spot that's a little sliver on the map, doesn't that have to extend 75 feet from the high water line?
If it's in the flood zone, yes.
Okay.
No, but I'm not sure, quite honestly, it is a good question.
Okay, so and
I don't think so, because he's already sort of approved these maps. Just because it's 75 feet, like that, I think you're looking at two different things. Like a lot of the 75 feet is based on, well actually, I'll back up even further. There is no footage, really. In the sense that if it's in the flood zone, it's in the flood zone. The flood zone could be at 2 feet, it could be at...
right, well, I'm not necessarily talking about flood zone, because, but the other things that I see, other criteria that from their model ordinance, which is the minimum that we have to comply with, I see it saying areas of 2 or more contiguous acres with continuous, with sustained slopes 20% or greater. And I feel like I see places like that along Brightwater. But more important, land areas it's like 13A4 in the model ordinance. Land areas along the rivers subject to severe bank erosion, undercutting, or riverbed movement, and lands adjacent to tidal waters, which are subject to severe erosion or mass movement, such as steep coastal bluffs. And when you're going through the Narrows into the basin, that east shore, I mean, there's trees, 5 years ago, I could walk around big oak trees, 3 feet in diameter, and I was walking around looking for mushrooms, and now there's no around anymore. They're tipping over, they're working their way down that bank. And all across the foot of the meadow, where the archaeological dig, when I was younger, there was a 60-degree or so slope from the level of the meadow, and then there was a 20-foot band of marsh grass with a 2-foot drop to the beach, and now the slope's gone, the marsh grass is gone except spots, and the whole bank is undercut along that way. So to me, it seems like easing restrictions toward a receding shoreline is just a really bad idea.
First of all, what happens is those trees that you used to be able to walk around, but you can't walk around anymore.
Yeah.
I won't say where the statement came from, but it came from the state of Maine. You can legally get permission to cut those trees because those stumps will hold that bank. And the tree should be cut because that's what will hold the bank. If you let that tree tip over, the root system on most all of those trees will stretch anywhere from 20 to 40 feet.
Sure.
So now you've got 40 feet of erosion, and then all of that is going to go into the ocean. So by allowing an arborist or a forester to come in and determine that those trees are considered hazard trees, then you can legally take them down.
I hear what you're saying, but it just seems like it's so much of the shoreline, and it's an expense that I don't think we could handle.
Well, you don't have to do anything. It's your choice.
I understand. I'm just saying,
have a choice.
my point is, I feel that those are rapidly eroding banks that would fall under that category of mandatory shoreline or resource protection. So that's my question is whether you've looked at it in that.
That's why Jeff, you kind of universally said, I mean, you guys can walk the shorelines if you want, but arguably you're not licensed or you don't know what you're doing. And so that's why we had to get a mapping company to come in. But I mean, as for what you're saying, from like sort of know the properties, the 20% is for like 100 feet, is a certain distance too.
Two contiguous acres.
Yeah, whatever it is, and so, you know, if that specifically area must have missed that or just been under that.
I don't wanna like take up more than my time, but that's the bulk of my concern on that level. And the other thing is that, we just, as I said, we would like more time to look into this. I think I speak for a lot of people here because it is very confusing, it's very complex. As I said, you guys have much more expertise than we do. But I also wonder if you've consulted with the comprehensive plan. I mean, is this in coordination with that at all? And then I'm gonna put this down and walk away because I can't take the heat up here. I love you all, well, you know.
Hi, I'm Bob Reyes. I live on Parkerhead Village, and I am co-chair of the Conservation Commission in town. I'm co-chair on this year as well. The first observation is the process. Most of us were not given any notice about this meeting. We didn't know it was an issue until like 2 weeks ago, and it's all been word of mouth. So the process has really not been handled well. It's a serious issue, as you can see, the presence of all these people giving up, you know, their evening time. So I think the process.
I gotta interrupt you for just a second. Every Sunday, all winter, we had workshops where we discussed this, and it's on the website, and we can't send everybody an individual invitation to come to those things, so this hasn't just happened.
I'm suggesting that you need to revise the process, that if you have some issue that's of this significance, you need to put it up in the library, you need to put it up at the post office, you need to put it up at the store, so that we know what's happening. So the process is flawed, that's what I'm saying, and I hope you take that for what it's worth and refine the process.
We did follow the guidelines on the process.
Follow the state's guidelines on the process.
But those are minimum guidelines, so I'm suggesting you could do more. I hope you take that to heart. Secondly, is that if you were to go with the DEP guidelines of 75 feet, those are minimum criteria. There's nothing that says that the city can't have criteria that are different.
How was
Well,
that?
We gotta dispel this one, right? Yeah. Well,
Can you guys use the microphone too?
what I'm trying to say is that I've heard that quite a bit, that we're all of a sudden putting in a 75-foot setback. But what I've had those telephone calls quite a bit, and we aren't. We just decided all the setbacks, the 100, 150, those aren't going anywhere. The shoreline zone setbacks aren't changing.
Those are construction setbacks,
Yes,
but we're talking about clear cutting.
okay.
So,
We gotta make,
You're not talking clear cutting.
we're talking the point system.
Okay, well, the trees are going to come down. There's some significant number of trees would be affected.
Okay, well, this is what's been happening around town for a long time. This is the standard practice of town, so it's nothing new.
And what I'm suggesting then is that if they're going to be cutting more trees, it is quite likely to have a water runoff effect. Because the fewer trees, the less there is to hold on to. So it could potentially affect the runoff. And has anyone done an assessment of what the impacts would be?
So you're suggesting every property that's on the shoreline that has the right to use the point system should do a study to determine if there's runoff?
Or at minimum, the city should hire someone to look at it globally. So we could understand globally what are the potential impacts. Because if you do look at the comprehensive plan, kind of the overarching guidance is that the people that live here love the place the way it is, because of its rural character. You start taking down the trees and that rural character disappears. We end up looking like suburbia. We don't want to live in suburbia.
We understand that, but ultimately, again, we're trying to just get it, have it be legally, have everyone be able to legally cut trees along the shoreline like they have been able to do until 2 years ago. Like, it's not like this is a new thing. You're worried about runoff. You're bringing up an issue that basically you've had a study for the last 50 years because that's been allowed for 50 years. It only hasn't stopped in the last 2 years.
Okay, well,
And the flip side is there's a lot of homeowners that bought their property assuming they could use the point system. That was the practice, and now the DEP has changed the rules, and it's not fair.
I'm saying that there are criteria. DEP is one, the town has its own set of criteria. We don't necessarily have to meet the minimum criteria of DEP. We can put in place more rigorous criteria if we want to. And that's a choice. And I think, we get I guess, vote on that next month, whether we want that or not. But again, what I'm taking away from the comprehensive plan is we love the character as it is. We want to maintain the character, and cutting down trees here is not going to keep a rural quality of life.
It just seems like it just seems a bit dramatic to say that we're cutting down trees, because all we're really doing is reinstating the point system that everybody's been using all around town for umpteen years. So it's not cutting down trees and despoiling land. This is just preserving the rights that people have had here. That's all we're doing.
Again, I'll just refer you back to the comprehensive plan, but there is a character here that we love as is, and changing the criteria that helps us become suburbia is not the direction I think we want to go in. So again, if we could change the process, and we will, I guess, find out next month what people feel like. Thank you.
Hi, pardon me, I'm Sam Gamber. I live on Main Road around Vermore Bay. I just have a couple questions. One of which being, have any professionals on shoreline health per ecosystem been consulted on the effects of cutting even on smaller scales on individual properties? Have any scientific documents been looked at on these effects? I understand that these changes went into effect 2 years ago, and prior to that it was as it always was. But have any studies been looked at the effects, long or short term, of this change versus not having this change made permanent?
Honestly, wouldn't have a clue, probably not, or I can't say, maybe the state has. I mean, effectively, we're going to this is state rules. So, it's not like we're trying to do something different than the state. There's the shoreline zone, and then there's resource protection. The shoreline zone rules are all still in effect. Like, we're not taking out any rules other than the resource protection, which is tree cutting. I think I said before, or not, maybe I didn't, in researching this, one of the things that we actually do all the time is we look at other towns. And the surrounding towns, Woolwich and Georgetown, have, I would argue, it seemingly looks like state mandated resource protection. West Bath literally has none. The shoreline zone of West Bath has zero resource protection. I don't see that, they don't have any issues at this point with acting the way it does. And they also have, they can build to within 75 feet of the water, where we are vastly more restricted than that in this town. So, I guess the answer is no. I mean, there's no studies being.
We have not done studies.
Okay, and then keeping in mind that every ecosystem is just a little bit different, and Pittsburgh is not the exact same town as West Bath or Rouseck or Georgetown. I'm just confirming that there have been no studies or research done on Phippsburg ecosystems specifically to see the effects of this change, long or short term, in place or not?
No.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Julie Finch, and I've been here 26 years in Parker Head. I live next to the Climbers Landing, and I have two questions. I don't know what the point system is.
All right, so if you own property on the shoreline and it's within, actually,
The first
the
75.
first 75 feet, if there is a legal way to thin the trees down there, and it works on a point system. You make a grid that's 25 by 50 feet across your property inside that area. And then once you've done that, you literally count the trees. A tree up to 4 feet or 4 inches in diameter is 1 point. And then the trees are there's a point system based on the size of the tree. Then you're allowed to cut a certain percentage of those trees. There's a very elaborate formula as to what you can cut.
You can Google it, it's on Google, you can Google it.
Yeah, you can Google it. It's in our, it's page 36 of the Shoreland Zone.
Thank you. And I was looking at the two maps very carefully, and then I started freaking out because the two colors are interposed, they're changed. Why did you do that? Are you trying to confuse me?
No, it's more to align ourselves with the state. People think of resource protection as green, and that's like other towns do it green. We're trying to be more, I guess, uniform to what the state says. It is, I know it's confusing, but it wasn't intentional. It's basically what the mapping company brought to us.
Okay.
We could change it back, and it literally is a...
So I've been planting trees. I've planted 2 pines and a birch tree and a blah, blah, blah. So I am in favor of more trees. I agree with Grace.
Sure.
Hello, I'm Stevie or Francis Epperly. I'm on the Climate Resilience Committee and my co-chair is here also. My question, I think, is a little bit longer term, but I first want to say I'm not in a disagreement about revising our shoreline resource protection zone. I think that's a good idea. You've given some good reasons for that to happen. What I'm curious about is why the rush in September to vote on it. And the reason I'm asking is the Comprehensive Planning Committee is working on a future view for the town. So if they have recommendations in there that conflict with the map that you just want us to vote on, we may have to go back and do it again, which doesn't make sense. The other piece I have to make a statement about is the vulnerability assessment that's going on across the town. So it's looking at access to quality water. There are aquifers that have been overdrawn with our droughts and so forth, fire and flooding. It is looking at what will the high water be in 5 years, 25 years, 50 years, 100 years. So that could help inform where these lines are drawn. So my question is, knowing this information is available or will be soon, why make the decision so quickly?
I guess I don't really have an answer for us. It hasn't been quick. We've been working on it for quite a while. I recognize that a lot of folks didn't realize this was going on. But there are folks that do know what's going on because they want to clear property in front of their house. It's just the way the timing worked out. We didn't honestly realize, we were thinking it was going to end up being in June. This is a special time meeting. It wasn't rushed to put it in this time meeting, it's just timed out that way.
Yeah, but if you wait another 2 months, 3 months, you'll have all this other information, which might be helpful. I'm just saying, I hope you consider, I have offered a draft for the planning board to look at this vulnerability assessment. It's not gonna have everything.
When did you offer that?
Today.
Okay.
Yes. And you haven't seen it, it's 155 pages, so we won't need to go through that. But I've already said how I can help you see the pertinent places. Anyway, it seems like it's rushed, that's all. Thank you.
Again, I'm Peter Blatchley, and just for you folks who don't know how to use microphones, keep them about 6 inches so you don't get. So, I've received a bunch of letters from family members and neighbors, and I'm gonna give you copies of each of them. I'm not gonna read them all, but I want to read a couple of paragraphs from one of the letters here, in fact, the one I wrote. Pittsburgh's 2003 comprehensive plan is quite explicit about the high priority of protecting the town's waters and productive mudflats against polluted runoff from development along the shore. The current shoreline zoning ordinance supports this priority. I should point out that any town's zoning ordinances must conform with the priorities outlined in the comprehensive plan, because this was the legal basis for the zoning change in Bath that recently happened that disallowed cluster homes to be built on the Bath Golf Course. I would argue that the wholesale relaxing of the 250-foot resource protection zone, as the planning board is recommending, would put the revised ordinance at odds with a comprehensive plan that is, as it is now written, and could possibly be challenged in court. I know that I, like many of my fellow citizens here, feel blindsided by the proposed changes. I would say there's two things. One thing is the science and the technicality issues. I think those can all be dealt with. I think some educational stuff needs to take place. We need to better understand it. The other thing is process. And I think most of the people here who are upset and being here are because we're more blindsided by this process. I work in the town office. I'm the harbor master, and I didn't know anything about it. So it's not my fault. I don't think it's my fault. So here's what
How long have you been the harbor master?
Oh, just since February.
Okay.
Yeah, not 2 years. I know, I just feel that this is happening too fast. And a binding vote at the special town meeting called for September 17th, at which many of us won't even be allowed to vote. Many of the property owners here are out-of-town taxpayers, and we can't vote on this. And that seems just incredibly unfair because we're all affected by it. So further, there's a new comprehensive plan in the works, a new climate resilient assessment, and a new community wildfire protection plan, all of which could have significant bearing on how the town should approach the issues inherent in the shoreline zoning ordinance. So I'm not standing here saying you guys have done a bad job. I don't think that's true, and I think we need to respect the amount of work and time that you put into this. But I am saying that the planning board should, I think, formally request the select board to indefinitely postpone the special town meeting and instead open up the process to all stakeholders so we can get better educated the way you guys are and feel more comfortable with the technical issues as well as with the process. Finally, I'll just say, as one of many hundreds of non-resident taxpayers who have shorefront properties in Pittsburgh that will be directly impacted, it does seem grossly unfair that none of us will be able to vote. Our voices and our concerns should matter, and I hope you can develop a process, not this process, but revise the process that does allow all of us to vote on the eventual outcome. And I really appreciate your time and attention. I'll get copies of these letters to you.
Hello, Christopher Sewell. I'm the one year-round resident of Hermit Island. I'm the president of our family company, and we have been in business for, well, I think it's 76 years at our lobster wharf, and it'll be 75 years next year for our campground. I want to thank you for your volunteer efforts, for the time that you volunteer for this town, because it's difficult, it's boring, it's complicated, and it's contentious. And so anybody that takes the time to volunteer for the town, I think, should be applauded. My big concern is, I just became aware of these changes today. that's in part on me. My concern is how these changes are related to the tax changes and the ongoing revaluation. And in particular, why I'm concerned and why right now I don't think I can support this new map is because you have rezoned the entire undeveloped shoreline of Hermit Island, which had been under resource protection, and now it has magically changed to residential. And that to me seems that would clearly affect your revaluation, going from shoreline, from resource protection to residential. And the concern is that this portion of shoreline has never in the history of European settlement had residences on it. It's ledge and cliff of a slope that clearly meets the standards for resource protection. And it baffles me how this could turn from resource protection into a residential zone. And I'd like an answer. How can that be?
As I said earlier, we're not the experts on it. We hired a company to come in and just purely based on state rules, they dictated what, according to the state, needs to be resource protection and what isn't. Now, I will say right up front, if you don't want it to be non-resource protection, it can be, or if you want it to be resource protection, it can be put back in. This map is not set in stone until we vote on it. That's sort of why we're here. If you want to be in resource protection, I should back up on that. I mean, we're not going to want to have a lot here and a lot that's resource protection, and one that's not, and one that is that gets too confusing. But I mean, obviously, the island, you know, if you want it in there, it can be in there.
Yeah, I don't understand how something that was resource protection, that's clearly not residential, not even, you know, effectively being able to turn into residential, how did it become in this process? How did it become nearly a third of our shoreline become residential? Because I think clearly there will be other implications of that. And it's problematic. And yeah, I want it back to resource protection. It's not residential. So that's what I got to say right now. Thank you.
Chris? I would just like to say that the mapper got all the overlays she used for the flood zone and the steep bluffs and all that from the state's information, from the state's surveys. So it's not like she pulled it out of the sky. She got all that from the state.
Well, right, but it was resource protection. So has the state decided that it's no longer resource protection? And why isn't the state here, and why isn't the company here that made the map to answer these questions?
Yeah, that's right. The state is the one that says it's no longer resource protection because of the surveys that they do.
Well, I'd like to see the documentation regarding the Hermit Island property that says it's residential now, according to the state.
Hi, I'm Charles Norris, Popham Beach. As the questions go along, I agree with a number of them, but I'd like to amplify one of the questions with the graphics. Whether or not this is a standard procedure, the graphics that don't show where the shoreline is, but simply show green, doesn't allow you to tell where there's a resource protection area. Now, there may be overlays in this, but it's certainly not accessible to us online and so on and so forth. Therefore, it's very difficult in the example of my abutting Silver Lake to assess how shoreline protection has changed from 2015 to the current proposal. but it looks to me a great deal like, as Chris just said, about 50% of Silver Lake is no longer in shoreline protection, regardless of the fact that it is not developed for residential, and that it's wetlands and so on and so forth. But it's almost impossible to determine that from the maps the way they're drawn. I really think that the water areas and the high water mark has to be delineated for people to be able to respond to that. Now, we also have a problem in front with the beach, where our houses are now all in resource protection land because of the erosion that's taking place. And, you know, this...
Mike, please. Bring your mic to...
I'm saying at Pop Beach, we're finding now that many of our residences are in the resource protection shoreland zone. And we're getting squeezed between resource protection from Silver Lake and the ocean. But I do think that a clarification is necessary, and I would certainly echo those who said we need more time on this, and there must be some mechanism for non-resident taxpayers who own a good portion of the properties that are affected by this to have some voice. If it means that we need to write letters, to have groups kind of come up with a set of recommendations, it would be helpful. I would also, again, thank you, as Chris did, for undertaking this and trying to assess with your consultants. The shoreline is roughly equal to the state of Florida and has many nooks and crannies, of which many people are commenting on tonight, because a lot of it is in micro areas that we're all most familiar with. So I hope we can continue this and have a consensus as we go forward. Thank you.
The only comment I will say about that is when you're saying confusion on shoreline setback. The shoreline zone is 250 feet from the water, period. And it doesn't, like, it may not show exactly on the map, but if you're within 250 feet of the water, you're in the shoreline zone, and you have to meet shoreline zone rules. That's how the shoreline zone works. You know, the resource protection, I mean, the old map, I'll say, it varied a lot, but in a lot of areas it was 125-foot resource protection and then 125-foot residential. That's how it was written. I would argue with, back to Chris saying it's residential. It's basically there for lack of a better term, in the sense that it's the shoreline zone. There are setbacks throughout the whole town in the shoreline zone that allow residential building there. You kind of have to separate the two. The resource protection was an overlay that protected that area. It didn't have anything to do with development or cutting or building or where the shoreline zone started or stopped. It was just the resource protection overlay over that area. And that's basically all we're doing, is removing that in a lot of the town because it's not required by the state. And again, it literally comes back to just the people that own property on the water, if they want to be allowed to trim trees or cut according to the rules, we're trying to allow that. That's ultimately what we're trying to do. We're not trying to change anything.
Well, thanks, John. But I must say that a lot of the confusion that we're hearing tonight is because it's very difficult with the proposed map to sort of understand where the shoreline is, especially for fixed areas like Great Ponds and so forth, but certainly, you know, anywhere there's ledge and so on, the shoreline is pretty well set. But it's very difficult to assess your own particular neighborhood with the graphics, because the pond and the shoreline protection area is all represented as the same. So anyway, it would be helpful to have that clarified.
Thank you. Hi, I'm David Boyle. I live on Brickham's Cove in the Middlebrook area. I'm co-chair of the Resilience Committee with my partner in crime, Speedy. So first, I'd like to thank the board for working on those Sunday mornings when I was enjoying what we called the Church of the Holy Comforter. So my question, comment is related, I think, to these last few, and I think also to Lori's explanation about overlays that were used. Yeah, I feel also that it's very hard to read the current map. I mean, if you go from Brigham's Cove down to Brightwater, you ask yourself, is that little sliver of green, what is that little sliver of green? So this is sort of a cartography, I guess. Is it fair to say maybe there's some more homework to be done in surveying and resource protection is supposed to be actual areas of floodplain, hydritic soils, wetlands, important habitat, etc. We don't have those designations yet on the map, right? And it gets personal. If I zoom in on my lot, it's all green. And I don't remember anybody coming and surveying or talking to me about that, and that would be very hard to pick off of an overlay down to that level. So I'm just wondering if do we need time to do a little bit more work to actually, if we're going to remove a continuous boundary of resource protection, don't we then need to go back and really nail those areas that should be resource protection very specifically and label them and designate them?
Well, so the thing about labeling, I don't remember the exact number, and I don't remember all the terms, but there were probably, when Judy showed the other towns that were being done, and then when she first came back to ours, there are, I don't remember, 8 or 10 different reasons to be in resource protection. And she has that. We can, I assume we can get a hold of it so that people can see what specific designation it is. She recommended just going green, because ultimately it's the same thing, it's resource protection. If someone wanted to know why, it can be dug into, but it's still ultimately resource protection. It doesn't, you're just bringing it into these rules that are resource protection, and then in reality, as far as I know in the book, is the only thing that it stops is cutting trees. So that is there. The reason why it's not, like I said, it does get, like I said, is something we're gonna have to look into. If something is, resource protection it doesn't necessarily have to be a line, a certain footage. It's whatever the cartography says it is. And that's what that is gonna dictate. And I guess that is something we'll have to talk about it, about how to treat that.
Thanks, that makes sense. Appreciate your work.
Hi, Jim Mahegan, and I live on Main Road. My property's changed a little bit. What was yellow is now green resource protected, the corner of my property, where my access road and probably, I believe, one of my outbuildings is. So I don't know how that's going to be affected. Am I going to be able to work on my road? Am I going to be able to gravel and compact my road? And would I be able to pave it in the future?
The answer is yes. I mean, I would argue you've now become non-conforming. Half the town is non-conforming, and there are rules that designate that you are allowed to do that even though you're non-conforming. So I don't think that's going to change for you, or I believe it won't.
So, I mean, working on my road, anything like that's not going to be affected?
That's like the properties, I'll actually go back up and say there's actually a few things that actually do get impacted by this. But you just have to, I lost my train of thought. Back to the road.
Expanding the shed, for example.
Yeah. I totally lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
But, sorry about that. But ultimately it comes down to that because you're there, they can't change it. Well, I know what I'm saying. So on the shoreline, if you've been maintaining, if you're in resource, right now, you're all in resource protection unless you're in a village district. Maybe not you, because you're where you are. But those areas, if you've been maintaining the trees in front of your house, there's rules that say you can maintain it.
Okay, what about like removing dead loss and things like that from a resource protected area?
Hazard trees.
Hazard trees,
Okay,
there's
so
rules, yeah, if you read.
okay, so that would be a hazard tree? Okay.
Yes, there's ways to cut down hazard trees, dead trees, it will impact that way.
Okay.
A lot of the trees you're not allowed to move in your parcels anyway.
Pay attention to the microphone. Sorry.
Okay, the only other thing I wanted to point out was the tax map is notoriously inaccurate as far as where boundaries are and everything. I was able to overlay the satellite map. How accurate are we gonna need to be to say this tree you can cut and that tree you can't cut? I mean, what is that gonna come down to?
The point system.
The point system?
All of you people that are curious about all of these things, you go to the town website.
Okay.
And you go to the town website, you can pick up the shoreland zoning rules and read them all. And that will give you, most of you, all of the answers. You're asking us questions that are all right here. I read one of them in particular, and like I said earlier, either a licensed arborist or a licensed forester can come in and determine a hazard tree or a dead tree, and you can get a permit to do it even now. This, all we're trying to do is so that all of you people out there that have been cutting trees in front of your house on the water, it was illegal, as I read earlier. You aren't allowed to do any of them except the hazard ones and the dead ones. Otherwise than that, you people that are cutting down trees, totally not legal to do, according to the new DEP enforcement officer, Jeff Calamage. The person prior to him let people do that. And everybody's been asking if there's been a study for this and a study for that. Tree cutting along the shore has been going on for over 50 years that I know of, because that's when I started. And it happened before that. All of the people were cutting trees to maintain their property, to maintain their view. This was all cut off by the DEP. When Jeff Calamage went to all of the people in the DEP, and they deemed that because of this one sentence right here in our ordinance, that we weren't allowed to do any of that. That's because it's in resource protection. I'll read it to you again. It's on page 36. Clearing and removal of vegetation for activities other than timber harvesting in a resource protection district abutting a great pond, there shall be no cutting of vegetation within a strip of land extending 75 feet horizontal distance inland from the normal high water line, except to remove hazard trees. It's as simple as that. The next line is, elsewhere in the next resource protection district, the cutting or removal of vegetation shall be limited to what is necessary for uses extremely authorized in that district. And then it just goes on to tell you the whole thing. In each district, what you're allowed to. It even gives you a graph down here of how many trees and how many points you get for each tree and how many you have to leave in that 25 by 50 block. It's all written right out there. A lot of your answers that you're asking tonight are all there. And for all of the people that are wondering, have we done this study and done that study? Yep, they've been being done for the last 50 years. All
right, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Ron Dunsky. I live in Parker Head Village. My question is actually exactly on the topic, Mr. Hawks, that you were just talking about. Unless I'm mistaken, here's how I understand part of what's going on here. The town has seen fit, for reasons that no one seems to remember, to have put in place resource protection rules that go back quite a while. For some reason, those were not enforced. And what the town is now proposing is to align the practice with the town's rules. The practice being that people were cutting down trees even though they were technically or legally not supposed to. So if that's the case, my question is, why is the town's view on this? It seems to me that the town's view on this is that in order to align things, we need to undo the resource protection rules in order to match what people have been doing through unenforcement. Whereas we might want to ask the question, why were those rules put in the first place? And what was the impetus for those rules? And maybe the reasoning was not good. It's quite possible. Maybe it's outdated. That's also possible.
I wasn't around in 1989.
Okay.
These rules started.
Okay, so I'm sure you weren't, and by the way, I echo everyone's gratitude for your work and your patience and so on. But just as a matter of approach, right? Why would the assumption be, well, we have to align our rules to the fact that people have been non-compliant with the rules? Why wouldn't we look and say, well, what were those rules put in there in the first place for? And again, there may be all kinds of reasons why they're no longer applicable or they're outdated, right? But to drive this whole thing on aligning practice, which was in fact contrary to the rules, that's not a very compelling reason in my view. Right? I mean, it's like saying, well, there's rules against theft, but everyone steals, so we better get rid of the rules against theft. It's not a very logical way to proceed.
I get what you're saying 100%. But it's state rules that we're going down to. It's not like we're eliminating rules.
Understood.
We're bringing it back to aligning it with the state. As for when it was put in, no one here knows, and if anyone should know, it would be great. The state rules were different back then. The town rules were different back then. It just, like, my guess is it just people didn't realize what it was.
But but what's in our ordinance is consistent with the state. But what's in our ordinance is consistent with the state rules. Right, all the different criteria, that's in our RP. So the RP that is in the map is different than what's in the ordinance. So that's important to know too. It's not like for some reason they're there, but if you read our ordinance, they shouldn't be there. If you look at the criteria of what's RP in our ordinance.
Folks,
It's the situation. It was very frustrating when the DEP folks were here because we asked them, well, here's the ordinance, here's your ordinance, why are you enforcing no point system in areas that don't meet your criteria? And they said, well, the map says RP, so we're going to enforce it. Seemed very unfair to me, but that's their attitude.
Do we know when the map was set up with a continuous boundary of RP? It seems to be the key question. We don't know.
Okay, so I understand that there's a discrepancy even within our own designation.
Well, it's not quite so black and white.
Yeah, I see the point. The only other thing I'll say is that it would be helpful with these other studies that are underway to maybe consider, wait just a month or two and consider those. I know you've been working on this a long time, so to you it doesn't seem like it's just popped out of the box. That's understood. And I just want to make one final comment, is that in my 20 years here or so, I've noticed that the area has become much more thriving in terms of the fisheries, particularly the oystering and so on. And it would be good to understand if there is potentially an impact on that very traditional work that's done around here. I know that you don't know that, but it would be good to understand that.
So, studies have been done by the state as far as water runoff and what have you. That's why you cannot make an opening in the canopy of over so many square feet. Plus you have to leave a certain amount of trees. That's what they call a point system.
Right.
And so, that being said, I won't say any names, but I know of a person 20 years ago, that cut the trees that he wanted to cut. He paid a $12,000 fine, and he had to plant the trees back. And the same thing for all of the people that are concerned about all of this in these different areas. If somebody wanted to, they could go along the shore and see who's cut trees, and they could be paying thousands of dollars in fines, and they could be replanting all those trees that they cut down. We are trying to take care of this. This is a much larger issue than people realize, and it is the only issue, because you'll see on the whole agenda, there's nothing in section 12 through the rest of them. We aren't changing any of them. And that's how you meet the setback for all the steep slopes, the setbacks on what you're allowed to build in and not allowed to build in, all of that stuff. And, as Jim Maloney said earlier, there's trees that are falling over going in through the basin, okay? They're gonna tear out that shoreline. Their property is gonna get smaller.
Right.
So, if you cut those trees and you leave the stump, and it's going to hold that shore much longer because it will take a long time for an oak stump to rot, and any other stump as far as that goes. So this is much good, probably more good than there is bad in all of this. But people are paying thousands of dollars every year to have a house lot on the water, and they are paying for a view. And we're trying to make it so that they can have that view legally and not hurt the environment, not cause water runoff or anything else. Because what also happens is, all of these lots, once a house is built, then all of those trees, if they aren't maintained in that distance, like John said earlier, the setback is 50 feet, 75, 125, certain areas. But if you can build a house 75 feet from the water, and you have a big overstory of trees, now you're going to cut out all kinds of trees to make room for a house, a well, and a septic system. Now all of those trees from that house to the shore, they were all being helped to stand up. Now the wind is going to blow them down, one at a time. There's been all kinds of places, especially along the shore, that trees blow down because they're no longer protected by their brothers and sisters, or whatever you want to call it, other trees. There's a lot that goes along with it, so. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess there's no good time sometimes to speak about something, and it is involving shoreline ordinance. And I promise I won't take any more than 5 minutes, because I won't really be talking about trees. My name is Nancy Cuthbertson. I reside at 28 Woodland Lane. I am a member of the Pleasant Cove Homeowners Association. We're off of Fiddler's Reach, down by Boatyard. And I purchased my home now approximately almost 9 years ago. And I plan on living here and dying here. I've made sure of that because I have a lot in the cemetery. Okay, so I'm not going anywhere. I have a huge vested interest in all of this. And you know, when you come to an environment, you look around, and there are certain things that are really important to you. And you assume when you look at your neighborhood, whatever that looks like, that you might end up with modifications, there might be some renovations, you might actually argue over trees and a fence line. And you expect that that is what you're going to deal with. Approximately, the homeowners, and I'm going to name it, I'm probably going to end up in big trouble over this, but you need to be aware of this. At 48 Pleasant Cove Road, they purchased their property approximately maybe 6 to 8 months before I purchased mine. Approximately 3 years after we were all there, they began to speak about how they perceived as though they wanted a better view. And we all kind of went like, okay. And then approximately 3 years ago, They came in, they demolished the existing house, and they removed the foundation. And since that time, we've always asked them at our annual meeting, what are your plans? And generally what we got were, well, you know, we really don't know, we're working on it. We had, and I'm bringing this up because it really is a process issue that we really need to identify very, very quickly. We had our annual meeting on 6/14. We again asked, what are your plans? We're not really, you know, we're not really having any at this point. I want to be careful about what I say because I prefer not to get sued. So I'm going to say it to the best of my memory and knowledge. And so then on 7/5, so that's basically what, 3 weeks later, my neighbors who are closer to that residence, I had received a pamphlet as well from a blasting company saying that they were going to come in and they were going to start blasting. And at the time we got that notification, it was like, you know, we anticipate, you know, you're going to follow the contours of the land because that's why you purchased this property. You're going to be reasonable with your neighbors. You're going to be respectful of the environment. And on 7/5, they received that notification. On basically 7/13, the blasting started. A great big, huge, I'm spacing on now, not elevator, I can't understand my word. Yes, and I am so upset by this. This great big, huge piece of machinery came in with a drilling blast. And on July 13th, the blasting started. And it started every single solitary hour on the hour. Every hour. It started at 7:05 in the morning, and it didn't end until 4:55 that night. And that went on the whole entire week. And my poor neighbors, who have lived here much, much longer than I have, are the eagles that have been nesting here for years. The heron, who has been here for 5 to 6 years, all left. And it went on for a week. We had a weekend of respite, barely a weekend of respite, and it started that next Monday. And it started that next Monday with more drilling. We figured that probably between when it started and it stopped, there were approximately 60 to 80 blasts. We had great big, huge dump trucks coming in, 3 at a time. As a matter of fact, Rogers, who lives up at the top, said it looked like a circus. They were putting these great big, huge boulders that were a third of the size, literally a third of the size of a small vehicle in these trucks and carting them away. That lasted for another 3 days, and then after that, thank God, the drilling went away. We were all looking at those great big, huge rubber mats, hoping to God they'd go away. I have a grandfather clock. That darn thing has never ever stopped. The pendulum stopped on it, and I was not nearly as close as my 2 neighbors here have been. It's been horrendous, and my worry is for all of us, because they came in because they wanted better views, they started blasting. When we got notification of the blasting from the people with the pamphlets, I went online, because nobody knew there was a permit in place. They initiated a permit. A permit was executed on 6/1, which was 2 weeks after or before our meeting, for $2.8 million. 2.8. And so what does that mean? That basically, for basically our summer, we have now, it's not even about our summer, the eagles are gone. Finally, now that the blasting is stopped, it's quiet, and it's too quiet. It's way too quiet. I'm hoping they come back. I mean, we're all mourning this. It finally stopped on July 23rd. And basically, you know, because we're, you know, a private community, right? So we've got this no trespassing with the exception of friends and guests. You are all of my guests to come down there and see the last of the stone. Because it goes up, they finally moved some of it away, but the excavator is gone. We have no idea as to what's going on. But just the remaining rock is nothing. It's minimal in comparison to what's pulled out of there. And it goes up probably about 9 feet. It reaches about 30 feet in length, and it's about 4 feet wide, and well, in depth.
Ma'am, I think we're getting off the subject of what
I know, but it's still shoreline ordinance, and if you think trees are an issue, just wait. Thank you.
You're welcome.
couple of things I forgot, and one of them had to do with the enforcement thing, and I wonder if there is another way to address this. First off, do you know, is the town gonna be exposed to some liability for improper enforcement as a whole?
For what happened in the past?
For the cutting that's gone on that was maybe improperly permitted?
Not that we know.
And are individuals that have, if this cutting was done in good faith, thinking they had a permit, are they gonna be sued for, I mean, is that a possibility?
Not that we know of.
I mean, they could be sued, but if they were operating with a permit,
Depends on how aggressive the DEP wants to be.
well, I don't, yes. So this fellow's saying that there weren't permits issued for that cutting, it was just an okay on the part of the codes officer. So
I really question that's gonna happen.
okay, so that's
Jeff, he didn't bring up anything about any of that.
Yeah.
He just said you have to stop, as of right
so
now,
if the town's not facing a problem of liability over these issues, and individuals are probably not facing a liability for what was done possibly in good faith, or at times in good faith with permission, at other times without permission. I know that there's, I mean, I've always thought it was a 75-foot prohibition on cutting, and I get mad at my neighbors because people take a few things out, but I just wonder if there isn't a means to make it a real education effort so people understand what they're not allowed to do in that resource protection zone, and tell them that, you know, you need to educate yourself because we're going to try to beef up enforcement. And if that were the case, would the town need more resources for that? And I know you guys, you deal with it all the time and having to weed through when somebody's trying to con you for a variance or they're in good faith. And
Jim, it spells it all right out in the shoreland zone, what you can and can't.
And unfortunately, we're not enforcement. Unfortunately, we're not the enforcement.
I understand.
Yeah, and that's.
So that's an issue for the,
It is, and we've heard frustration about it, for sure.
for the town, yeah. But anyway, I would like to see us look at that approach as well, because I think that every inch that we give up to increase cutting is gonna mean increased deterioration of the water quality. And in those regs, it also says you're not supposed to take anything shorter than 3 feet. So there should be 3 feet of brush all along the shoreline if it's resource protection.
Increased, it's sort of a loaded word because all we're doing is giving people the right to cut by the point system on their property. It's not like we're adding rights that people didn't think were there before.
All I'm saying, there's a lot of people that knew they weren't supposed to cut and were trying to be discreet about it, or people that knew they weren't supposed to cut and they didn't cut. And if you take away that restriction, there will be more cutting.
Well, that's an enforcement issue, obviously. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Paul Kelly, and I've been coming here for my whole lifetime. I'm also a voter in Brightwater and also a landowner nearby in Woodward East. So one question I have is whether there are any other implications for the land if the shoreline, if the resource protection status goes away, right? That prohibition on most all cutting goes away. Are there other implications that happen, or is it that really the only one?
As far as we know, that's the only one. And that's what our hopes are, our plans are with it. I mean, there might be some loophole that someone finds, and there always is. And if there is, we'll close it. I mean, ultimately, all comes down to trying to allow people to have clearing on their property, which is what they think they did.
Within the point system.
Within the point system. I actually sort of forgot about too, that there's another small aspect that, to some people it's not a small aspect. Once this all happened, another thing that the Rainey started enforcing, because it was resource protection, once it found out, was that okay, you've got 125-foot resource protection, and now you've got 125-foot residential or shoreline. I don't know. We actually wasn't sure what we were going to do with calling it, but regardless, I'm getting them straight. Well, so technically I can build my house to 125 feet. Well, how do you put a foundation in at 125 feet if you can't touch what's inside of 125 feet? You can't put machines inside of 125 feet. You can't, technically, if there's an 80-foot pine tree at 120 feet, you can't cut that down because it's inside the resource protection. And so there are other ramifications that this helps people with. But back to your questions, I don't think, as far as we know, it is just the cutting. And it's partly because we didn't change anything else. We talked about it, but we didn't.
Yeah. So there has been obviously a bunch of confusion, the distinction between the shoreline zoning and the resource protection is an important distinction. I'm not sure everybody was clear on beforehand. So I think, just hearing concerns in town, continuing efforts to clarify for everybody may be really helpful. That I'll just say, for myself, I'm all for all protections. I would be, when we first went into resource protection, and we understood that state rule meant no cutting except for the 3 foot or maintaining maintaining what existed. I said, great, we'll live with that, that's fine. I think the concern for water quality, for the fisheries, for all of that is important, and whatever studies have been done in the past, I don't know, we're facing some new situations. We'll be seeing shoreline rise, we'll be seeing more erosion of our shoreline, how the town should respond to that, what types of development, what types of development rules should be in place for that. Whether the point system remains the one, the right thing to use or something else, I don't know.
There was a different system in the past. I'm a builder in town. I've dealt with a lot of this for years and years and years. The point system is not perfect by any stretch, but it's a lot better than prior systems. I don't even know what they are. I'm sure Mark does and Jared does, but this is at least reasonable for one. It's somewhat scientific. I wouldn't call it scientific, but it's a plan to use. You're not just, it's not judgment calls.
And it's an attempt to balance. It's an attempt to balance the desire to have some kind of view, but the desire to maintain the canopy and to keep erosion down. Is it the right balance? Right, whatever.
The point system is used in the entire state of Maine, so it's not like it hasn't been tested. It has been tested.
Right.
Another thing to go along with what John said, we'll just say here in the district, the setback is 100 feet. The house can't actually be 100 feet exactly, because when you're building a house, you're supposed to leave 15 feet to 20 feet between there and that 100-foot section. We've enforced that as a planning board before, because you've got to have room for your equipment to operate, and you can't operate your equipment in that 100-foot area so that you can build your house. You're supposed to build your house far enough away so that you can operate equipment in the area that you're allowed to, not in any resource protection area.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michael Foster, and I live near where Paul is on the basin. I just wanted to say thank you very much again for your work, and also for making it clear right from the beginning, which was a big relief to me, that this had nothing to do with construction zones, construction setbacks, or any of that. That was really nice. It would have been helpful if that was out there up front somehow from the beginning. So all I'm asking for, and I don't know, you guys have been putting all this effort in already. I don't know if you have the resources or the time, but it would be helpful, I think, to have more time for people to understand what you guys know and what you had to learn in order to tackle this. And where can we get that information? You know, so for instance, people are talking about the resource protection zones and exactly what does that mean? What are the criteria? The company that you hired had all these different criteria. Where could we find that out? You know, and then what could we find out exactly what the restrictions are for those zones? Sounds like cutting, but there might be some others. But anyway, can we somehow get a list of resources so that we can do better work? Or if I do some work and find out some of these answers, is there a place I can post it so that other people can understand it? I think a lot of what the confusion and angst was about this meeting was because there wasn't enough information. And, you know, we didn't know, you know, like it says residential here. That's probably just like because there aren't that many choices.
It is, I mean,
you know?
One thing that you alluded to before, and it actually confused me as we were starting this thing, is the difference between a zone and a district. Like a lot of, they're two different things. Like that's why it's the shoreline zone. But within the shoreline zone, there are different districts. There's the village district. There is resource protection district. It's part of the shoreline zone. It's not a separate zone in itself. It's just.
And does that have a definition someplace?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So again, where can we find that out so that we understand?
It's the start of the shoreline zone ordinance talks about. It gives us a list of what each district is.
I would just ask that I would ask that the vote be postponed. This is my request, that the vote be postponed so that people can do more digging and satisfy themselves their information. I think, for instance, the point system that's been in use all this time is based on something, right? It's based on, I'm hoping it, right? That it's based on some kind of study that showed that this kind of point system and this kind of thinning of trees in the understory doesn't have a major impact on the land's ability to, you know, withstand storms and runoff and so forth. It'd be nice to be able, some of the folks that would like more restrictions might feel better if they knew what the point system was based on. Stuff like that. Yeah. So anyway, thank you.
Hello, Ben. Sam Gamber. I live on Main Road, just by Drumore Bay. Just a comment, no questions. As you previously said earlier in this meeting, there has been no official, published, or accessible to the general public research about the long and short-term natural effects of this change being implemented or not moving forward. At least none that were consulted to make this map, and definitely none specific to Pittsburgh. I want to call attention to 3 documents currently in draft that will have information pertinent to the potential effects of this decision going in or not. These are an updated comprehensive plan being drafted by the Comprehensive Planning Committee, a climate vulnerability assessment being drafted for the town by the Climate Resilience Committee, and a community wildfire protection plan being drafted by the Community Wildfire Protection Plan Committee. All 3 of these documents will include recommendations based on natural effects and changes moving forward for the future of the town. I feel that these documents, with their Pittsburgh-based recommendations and information, should be available to the town prior to any decisions being made about shoreline changes, so that residents can make a fully informed Pittsburgh's decision and researched decision. Thank you.
My name is Dick Hill. Our family has cottages at Topham. And one thing I noticed, first of all, a residential district, does that have a delineation of what you can and can't cut for trees?
I would argue yes and no. I mean, the residential district, it just means that you can build there, but the residential district is the shoreline zone, which does have all these rules. Like,
But if I see yellow on the water, there's no shoreline restriction.
if it's in the shoreline zone, you have to meet the
I'm
shoreline.
looking at a good part of Wood Island at Popham Beach, and probably more than half of that does not have any green edge on the water. Is my understanding,
Because of its elevation.
what's that got to do with the green line?
Resource protection.
Well, why isn't there a green line for shoreline protection? I just bring it to your point. You did a great job. There's obviously in any large amount of work, there are things that get missed that need to be corrected, and I just bring it to your attention. I believe that Wood Island's been sold and developed into a few lots.
We didn't do anything on the islands. We only did it on the mainland. That's the only place we did it.
Well, all the islands are here, Mark. I mean, but anyway, that's a minor thing. We've been talking about resource protection. If you think of the word resource protection, it's protecting the land and resources that exist. I think 99% of the discussions tonight has been about trees. I'd like everyone in the town and the board to know, you've seen me in front of you before, that the number of rocks that are being allowed on Popham Beach is absolutely disastrous. From the Spinneys all the way to the Coast Guard Station, when they had the big storm, the people put in whatever the width of their land, whether it's 8 feet deep, 20 feet deep and wide or whatever. Can you answer me tonight, has the state told them to remove those rocks yet?
It wasn't politically, we was told that it wasn't politically in their best interest.
Okay, so the state,
You can put whatever.
yeah. So the state caved, and those rocks are going to stay.
I don't know, call
Yeah.
DEP and ask them.
Okay, I can do that. Okay. I understand there's also consideration that they want to put 30, 40-foot steel piling down into the sand along there. And that would ruin a lot of wells. I think the town and the planning board could be involved here with these people. They were allowed to put the back 4x4, 6x6 posts with the wooden wall. If the state caves, I'd like to see the town step forward and say, put the wall back so the rocks won't get back on the beach. Years ago, we had a law in the state of Maine that there'd be no more rocks on the beach. We have 2 horrible rock piles down there now, and I understand across from the church, a house, the wooden wall caved, they dumped rocks. Resource protection isn't just about trees, it's about the earth and everything else. Thank you.
So, David Duncan, West Point. So, as many people have said, we know this is a tremendous amount of work. We've been working on it for 2 years. These committees take forever, so everybody absolutely appreciates what you've been working on. And I suspect there's good and bad things in what you've talked about. I'm actually kind of here for a couple of practical reasons. One is when you look at this map, and I won't read it, but there's note number 3 on the bottom of the map. And a surveyor friend of mine called me and said, did I know anything about it? I said, no. He said, would you please ask about this? So the point is how, it's kind of vague, and how you take these maps and then develop a site or survey a site, put the houses where they're supposed to be, to have the setbacks, to have the extra setbacks you need to work around it. How do you use this particular map to be able to create anything that's practical? So that was a really important question, I think. I mean, again, going forward, it's a very practical thing, but in the end, it's the most important thing. There are also, obviously, so many questions. Do you think it would be, actually, the first question is, the September 17th date, is that like a legal deadline you have, or is there some reason that has to be the deadline of the vote? You're pointing, Devin?
That's the date they gave us.
Okay, so let's take it.
Select board.
Well, it would be, perhaps, given the level of interest.
They meet every Wednesday night.
Yeah.
You can go, it's open.
I've been to plenty.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to establish that line you're talking about, when you're down there, you need to have a surveyor come in, and they're the ones that establish where that web area begins, where it ends. So that's how a person that's doing it the right way.
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
she was just talking earlier, he was talking earlier about blasting the ledge.
Yeah, okay.
You remember, you did for your house, right?
We did not blast.
You didn't blast?
No.
No, well, that's good.
Yeah. That's all. So, here's the thing. So, is it possible to maybe have a couple workshops, put this off a little longer, talk to the select board, see if, given all the interest here and confusion everybody has had, not that we should have it, but that is obviously here, to have a couple workshops where we can come in and say, practically speaking, on this lot, please walk me through it. That might go a long way for people to kind of understand how it's all, again, it's for taking it here forward. So that's no real comments, I don't need any answers, anything like that. I just think it would be a good practical way to approach it. Thank you.
So for everybody out here that's listening to a lot of these different things, I'll find it here. It has section 9 districts and zone maps. That's where we come up with resource protection, residential village, general development, and stream protection. And then when you go down through the Shoreland zoning ordinance, and you get to page 9, I believe it is. When you get to page 9, on the bottom of that, it says section 16, establishment of districts. And it gives you all the definitions of that particular district, resource protection district. And then as you keep going down through the shoreline zoning rules, it gives you all the criteria. Then it's a residential district, it's a village district. It gives you all those for all those people, all of you people out there that have asked. It's right there in the shoreline zoning ordinance. It's really something that all of you people, you're very concerned, you should get online, you should read the whole shoreline zoning ordinance, and you'll get a lot of your questions answered right there. Go ahead.
Okay, oh good. Tom Kelly, down in Brightwater. I have spent the last day or two looking over the shoreland zoning ordinance and some of the cutting rules and resource protection areas, looking over the maps that you folks put online. I appreciate the work you've done. It was a bit of a challenge looking through and trying to figure out what you were trying to accomplish. I feel like I have a better idea of how the cutting rules apparently have changed in interpretation over the last couple of years. At least that's what you're telling me is the practice that's occurred recently. So that's been helpful. I am concerned about going to a townwide vote so quickly. It's a bit of a complicated issue. I think a lot of folks, whether they've looked through the ordinance or whether they haven't looked through the ordinance, find it a difficult thing to understand exactly what the consequences of their land being categorized as resource protection. I'd be in favor of a delayed vote on it to give people a better chance to make sure they understand what it is that they're voting on. I guess I'd also query in terms of that goal, is the better approach to talk with you folks about issues of timing and vote, or to talk to the select board?
Select board.
Select board is the better venue there?
They're the only venue there. Yeah, we don't have any control.
All right. Thanks very much.
You'll have to keep your eye on the website as to when our workshops are going to be.
Good evening.
I'm Laura Sewell, and I too thank you for your work. This is a big one, I think, to take on. And I was hoping I wouldn't have to stand up here and talk, but no one's really said very much about the implications. The only implications so far have been trees or not trees, it seems. And I think the point system is very good. It's important that that is enforced. And for the most part, I think it's been well enforced. But it does occur to me that there are circumstances and instances where it can increase the stormwater runoff that would otherwise not happen under resource protection. There's just that many more grasses and roots and shrubs that catch what's coming off the land. And with increasing opportunities for development, less land in resource protection, more land in residential, it could be that, in fact, we see a lot of development. And we have a water quality issue. And so I'm concerned about stormwater runoff, the impact on water quality, and then downstream, the impact on marine resources. And I mean clams, oysters, lobstering, the health of the biodiverse system at the bottom of our bays and along our near coast waters. So that's a concern I have about impacts. And then I just have one question. First I have to say, Mark, you're right. We should all be reading the Shoreland zoning ordinance carefully. I can't remember this detail. I have read it, but is it true that in resource protection, any building or residence is required to be all the way back to the 250-foot line of the shoreline zone? Or is it 100 feet versus 75 feet on saltwater? I mean, that's the kind of detail I think that matters, that would convince me that this is really going to be an okay choice.
I would say that we've gone through it all. For the most part, any residential building is behind shoreline. It's behind new residential building is behind the resource protection. And some of it, I know I saw one place where it was like resource protection 50 feet, the building was 150 feet. So it wasn't like you had resource protection up to where you could build. Our building setbacks are pretty staunch versus the state.
Yes.
And so I don't believe there's any spot where you can build the resource protection at all, period, as it is right now.
That's exactly what I was...
We're not changing that. We're not saying, oh, we're taking the resource protection out of this area, so now you can all of a sudden build at 75 feet. That's not happening.
I get it. So for those areas that remain resource protection, any residential building has to be behind that 250-foot setback.
Well, it's not 250 because it varies on, even in our old maps it varied. There was some 250, there was some 125, and there was some other ones.
But in any case, it's, any residence is closer within residential than within resource protection, the way it is now. Is that correct?
Not that we know of.
But
it shouldn't be.
They can't change.
But it's important to note that
it's all in the ordinance.
it's important to note, and I think I'm correct, you guys correctly, but the changes we've made from resource protection to residential all are residential now. We don't have any land that we took out of our P that could be developed.
That's not true.
Oh, that's what I thought.
So that was Christopher Sewell's question about how all of the west side of Hermit Island had become all of a sudden residential.
Right.
I mean, and
Well,
that's a serious change because of the tax valuation.
Yeah, I
that would
understand
occur.
that one, but at least my understanding, guys, and maybe I'm wrong, but when we went through it lot by lot around, and that's certainly something the schools we have to consider. But I would say that most of the stuff north of Sebasco, which is really the bulk of what's coming out of resource protection.
Yeah.
Where it's residential already.
I appreciate.
So I'm
that
just
there
trying
are
to
those
react to
areas.
the point that we're out opening up all this land, there's gonna be all this stuff that can be developed. I don't think that's the case.
Well, I think those of us that are a little concerned,
Yeah, it's a fair,
we would like to know that before
That's a
we
fair question.
vote on it. And so that might be a good
I think that's
reason to-
important to note, and that's, so,
Oh, can I say one more thing?
yeah, at least I remember the day we went lot by lot by lot, we spent many hours going through there. So that was the intent, so if we missed some, but that, I think that was the intent, Mark, if I'm correct. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, I don't want to take up too much more time because it's late.
Yeah, hold on.
But,
I'm actually looking at the map, and, unfortunately, Chris is wrong. If you look at, Hermit Island, the whole backside of Hermit Island has 125-foot resource protection, and then 125-foot residential. So he can develop that whole section of the island, as long as he stays behind 125 feet.
he doesn't want to.
I understand he doesn't want to, but what he's saying is it's not, but it is. It's currently in residential. So just because we removed the resource protection part of that, he can't build in that inside the 125 feet anyway. The wording residential essentially doesn't mean anything because you can't. It's not like you can start building in 5 feet from the water. But so ultimately, it doesn't change his property.
Okay, so this is the kind of confusion that we need to sort out so that, as a community, we can all feel good about making this big decision.
The intent certainly was not to open up vast tracts of land to be developed. The idea was to allow people, as I said before, allow people that own houses that want to use the point system, now that they have historical.
I understand that
Yes,
that's your point.
that's the only thing we're doing.
Yeah, okay, I understand that. I'm just talking about the implications related to that choice.
So did you get it? Did you get it, Chris?
I
Doesn't.
certainly don't want to talk about Christopher's.
Because
You can't say that because you're not the one coming up with the valuation. And they're gonna look at the zoning to determine as part of their calculations of what the value of that property is. If you can cut more branches on the property to get a better view, that's going to be valued at a higher rate than a property that you can't cut more branches on.
no, it isn't.
I don't.
It doesn't change anything for you, Chris, though, because just like John pointed out to you, it's already, you can't build within 125 feet. And you can't do anything.
Yeah, I didn't mean to bring up Christopher's property, but let's go on. I have one more little thing to say, which is that there have been some important studies done about water quality around here. Friends of Casco Bay have done some really good studies with Bigelow Lab, looking at what happened after the PFAS spill in Brunswick. And the PFAS was traced all the way down Muir Brook, came out into Harpswell Sound. I think that's right geography. And it traveled a tremendous distance. And that was part of their finding, was that this PFAS showed up way the heck beyond where it started.
Have you ever tried to go down Route 209 after a heavy rain?
Yeah, stormwater.
It's flooded.
Yeah.
And so, what does that prevent? All that water coming all the way from this school, going all the way to the ocean at a rapid speed. I mean, you're going to get runoff and then...
That's my point.
There you go. So what, your point isn't, nobody's cut any trees, but the water still flows freely and as much and as
I'm
quick.
just saying that in
Let us slow
those,
it down.
Mark, in those areas where we have really valuable resources to protect, like a clam flat, in those areas, it's really important that we do our best to protect our resources. Not everywhere. I mean, I appreciate what you said, that there are already houses, some of them, they're not adjacent to a claim flag. But there are places where that little bit of stormwater can do a lot of damage. And we are already teetering when it comes to the health of our mud flats and the health of our near coastal waters. And I think that we would be wise to be very careful about that. So I'm just saying, again, maybe more time. There is a new commission that was just established to reevaluate the stormwater rules for the state of Maine. They're meeting on September 9th. That's their first meeting. I think they're preparing for the next legislative session, which would be in the spring. And I think it would be really good if we knew what they're determining about stormwater rules before we vote on this. But thank you for your work. I mean, it's important.
I will make one comment that came up at the non-residential, or non-residents town meeting, which I think this does impact, and ultimately in safety. Half this country is burning right now. And if we can't control some of the woods that we have, that's an impact. And if we can't touch any tree within 125 feet of the shoreline of Pittsburgh,
I hear
it's
you.
going to happen.
I hear you. It is another concern.
We need, we're not telling anyone to go cut trees down. If they don't want to cut trees in front of their property, they don't have to. It's not a rule. But there are a lot of people that want to,
of course,
legally, ecologically have their property done right. And that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ken Wyman, and I live down in Small Point. And I'm here just asking, I have some property that got put into resource protection that I have substantially developed. And I was just wondering if there's any limitations other than the tree cutting that would affect roads and buildings and parking spaces and anything else that got put into resource protection from the residential.
Where's the property? Because quite honestly, there's a fair chunk of the property near Head Beach that, by the rules, we're supposed to get resource protection, and we pulled out, like all along that bluff, where there's cottages lining it. That's an example in the town of where it's very essentially heavily developed. There's no reason to be a resource protection, and Jeff, that was one of the things that Jeff explained to us. So I'm not sure where you're pointing out. I just sit down and talk with you and point it out. If you've already developed it, it's grandfathered in. So that's not an issue. You're going to be able to maintain what you have going forward. If it's going into resource protection, that will impact you. In fact, that you won't be able to add roads or add structures or something like that, because now you're in that. I didn't think, honestly, we didn't think we did that virtually anywhere.
And you didn't for the most part, but there was a couple small areas. But for the most part, you're right, you did take like along Branch Road and everything like that. You took a lot of the buildings there out of resource protection and put them in residential. But there was just a couple small parts. And I think you mentioned earlier the flood zones, and my other question was, if it's in the flood zone, you said it had to be in resource protection, and my other question was, if it's developed and in a flood zone, does it still have to be in resource protection?
You'd have to get, it's the DEP that's dictating that. He basically said to us to go through, once the map was made, she just put everything that according to the state, the criteria by the state, put all of it in resource protection, so we know where it is. And then we sat down with her and went around the town and pulled stuff out that is developed. But it's kind of had to be like I would argue, majorly developed. Like, it couldn't be, oh, just because this house on 50 acres, we're gonna take them out. And so, I would argue it is possible, but all of this has to be run through like, none of this is gonna be passed if he doesn't okay it. And at this point, we have temporary okay, but it's not, he wants to see what happens before he gives us full approval.
Okay. And so I guess my concern is that we're gonna vote this either through or not through on September 17th. And this meeting right now is to hear what everyone has to say about their zones and everything like that. And my concern is that there's gonna be no changes made to the map before September 17th. And like you told Chris if he doesn't want the east side of Hermit Island put into the village district, if he wants to keep it in resource protection, that he could keep it in resource protection. And I'm just wondering if there's time to do that, if there's time to revise this map and make changes to it, or if it's just going to be a yay or nay on September 17th.
Well, if it goes through on September 17th, it will be a yay or nay. What I will say is, we control the map. If we want to be more restrictive than the state, we can be. And I think that's what I probably spoke a little quick with saying, oh, we can just take it out. But arguably, I believe that's true. Because if we as a town, unfortunately, it would end up being a warrant in a town meeting, and then, because there have been many instances in the past of people who have changed their zoning or districts. They put together a warrant, put it in the town meeting, and then it was changed after the fact. And then there's no reason that can't be true as well. I guess I didn't really go into detail, unfortunately, a lot of people believe it. What we're really doing with these maps, eventually, I think Evan's been in a few of the meetings, and he's been making sure that different maps will be able to merge together. Eventually, the town's going to have like a comprehensive map that will have layers of everything in it. And someone spoke earlier about it being confusing about what it doesn't match, and I mean, it probably never will be perfect, but I think it's going to get better as we work on that. And at that point, I believe we'll be able to work on a more individual basis.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Hi, Doc Kelly, Pleasant Cove Road. And thank you, as many other people have said, certainly taking on the responsibility of the commission position is wonderfully generous of all of you. My comment is one, the specifics. So as you look at the map, I too have a property that has a thin green line halfway on my property and then it disappears. It's not clear to me, knowing the property, why that is. And I do feel that it's incumbent on you to allow the residents to understand what it means for them. So that would mean that half my land is in resource protection. It's not a very big swath, and you've got a straight line back. So from what I understand, please correct me if I'm wrong, it's in resource protection from 0 feet to 75 feet. You really can't touch anything. If there's a dead tree or a dying tree that's a hazard, I do have one of those trees that's leaning, you can probably argue with someone to go and get a permit to say, yes, that's a tree that you can remove. And so am I right there, resource protection, you can't cut basically anything between 0 and 75 feet.
That's not true. People keep throwing out this 75-foot number. Effectively, most of Pittsburgh, I believe, it's not all that I know, is 125-foot resource protection. Like, the resource protection, I believe there are, actually, that's not, there's some of the ponds require 75-foot and stuff, but essentially you're under resource protection for whatever the reason behind.
Okay, I'm on the Kennebec River. So, my
Is it
understanding.
lowlands or is it a bluff coming up? Those were the two big ones. Inland wading wildlife, I don't think that was the Kennebec, that was most of the ponds.
I think it's
that
at
was a big one.
20%. I think it's at 20%.
Okay, I do have a cliff on part of it. That's the part that doesn't have the resource protection.
Yeah.
And it's very small cliff, you know, it doesn't extend for too long.
Yeah,
So I don't actually know, but I think that it makes sense that homeowners can get answers to those questions before voting on this. And then my other question was, did you consider meeting the need, which is that, yes, there's a lot of trees near the shoreland, which on all the things I've ever read is a benefit. You don't have as many rivulets coming down into the water, eroding the land. But people want a little bit of a clearing. So since we're more stringent than the state rules, was there a middle ground that opened it up some? You're not agreeing that people like me have kind of a hard and fast 75 feet and back, you really couldn't do much of anything, you know, back to the water. But if we assume that's true, there seems to me some middle ground where you can get a meandering clearing or what people want.
Quite honestly, when I first started building, it was, I won't call it draconian, but it was, clearing to the water was tough to get anything. We've hired people that were climbing ropes to create slot views in the canopy. I mean, because you couldn't cut trees. I think this, again, I don't, like I said before, I don't think it's perfect, but the point system is kind of, I think, that middle ground, and that's how it's the whole state has sort of come up to it. But actually, you talk about a meandering path, that is actually one of the few instances where you actually have legal rights for a 6-foot walking path through the resource protection district to the water. That is actually in the shoreline zones. And Mark alluded to it a lot. I've been on the board for a few years, and we did an entire redo of the shoreline zone a few years ago, and I'm still confused about some of the stuff in there. I've read it through it a dozen times, and things still come up. It's like, does it really say that, or it's tough? But I've been reading this an awful lot lately, and that, because it comes down to, yes, no, you don't. You can cut it in the resource protection district, but it's very limited. Like, if you've been maintaining it forever, you basically can continue to maintain it.
Okay, but I understood my area to be from 75 feet up to wherever the line is, 125 feet or all the way up to 250 feet, as you were saying. You then do the point system. So we've had the point system in resource protection. The difference of what you're proposing, and I'm asking you, is this true, is that now right to the high tide line, you can cut according to the point system?
Yes. That's, yeah, no, the answer is yes.
And I think that's a mistake. I think that our town is benefited by not allowing that much cutting all the way down, because there are people like me who actually thought they were regulated and didn't realize that there was a pass being given in the town. And it's been way more than 2 years of that belief. Thank you.
Can I make one quick question? When you're looking at the parcels on your maps, your parcels are outlined on the maps. I've done a certain amount of GIS mapping, including in the town. Those parcels are not digitally correct. Because they have, I'm correct about that. They're not digitized, so they don't sit physically properly on a map.
Yeah, Dan, come up here.
So don't make a mistake about where your parcel is, just look at the map.
Again, Speedy, Everly, I didn't say Hidden Ledge Lane is where I live, here in town. I don't know, questions are really for you as a board. And I've actually been on the planning board in Durham, Maine, so I kind of know and sympathize with and we went through a whole change of zoning. If you think you've convinced this audience that you've got the right idea, then I'd feel comfortable with going with the September 17th or whatever the date is vote. If you're worried that you're not, I would think twice. And maybe, because I just think about those people that want to change, what's their process? They're going to be coming to you one after another, making these changes. Is there a period where you can allow for some of that to happen before the vote? And that's for you to decide. You don't need to share with this group. I just wanted to share those thoughts. Thanks.
I'm sure we're going to have a discussion after this, and probably the select board will too, about this 17th. I mean, yeah, we'll just talk about it.
So I'm Denny Dark from Brightwater, and also have property on Pasture Road. And I just wanted to ask a couple questions about process. So you're talking about a possible vote on the 17th. You said that's up to the select board. Is anyone from the select board here tonight?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Is there how will you communicate to them the concerns people have? So many people have asked for more time.
I've got a growing list.
Okay. So you will talk to the select board.
This is Evan Didkowski, our town administrator.
Your town, okay, very good. So that was the first question. The second is, at the point when this does come to a vote, what are people voting on? Will there be language? Will it be a map? It's not clear to me what the question is or what the yes/no is.
Ultimately, it's the map. I mean, it's kind of weird, but the map supersedes everything. Literally, that map. It's that map over there. We do in here, in the shoreline zone, if you look at the back of it, it actually, that's where like all of the setbacks, well, it's actually on a map, so like that's how I pick the numbers out easily. In the back of the book, it literally goes, circles the shoreline of the zone of the town and says what's resource protection and what's residential. It literally goes lot to lot to lot, like that. We discussed keeping it, which also would mean work to modify it. Judy said no one does it anymore. It's the map is what counts, and the map also will be digitized. So eventually, well, I mean, it already is online right now, but eventually I think it'll be better digitized. But effectively, it is you're voting on a map.
Okay, so you're essentially legislating by map. I have heard from a number of people concerns about the accuracy of the map. Is there going to be a process or for people to be able to zero in on their own property to assess the accuracy?
You should be able to do that in the online version. I don't know if it's going to, in what I've seen of it, it is pretty accurate. You know, I think it's something that we are going to have to discuss a little bit is the aspect of the little slivers. Because, you know, essentially, I mean, I look at it, I guess I'm a little less progressive than a lot of people, but I also am, I would argue more than someone an environmentalist too. But, you know, just because a little sliver of my property is deemed resource protection, I don't want my entire property to be deemed resource protection. And that's what the map is doing. But that's where I think we're going to have to discuss is how do you, one, know that, and two, police that. That is a definite good question.
Okay. So the final thing, it's very clear to me, this is hard. And I commend you all for learning this and figuring it out. But I wonder, is there some way to help educate the public? Workshops, materials, something so that you have higher compliance, so you have, you know, people making educated votes, perhaps, you know.
I will take it under advisement, we'll talk about it. I mean, we do meet, we met, you know, people don't realize this board has gone through the shoreline zone, redo, then we had the big to-do about the solar power, so then that ended up being a solar ordinance, we've done that, then there's the ADA? ADU, and that to do with, we've been had a lot thrown at us.
You sure have.
Over the past few years, but we basically meet every Sunday, and it is open to the public, so.
Okay.
I mean, as for advertising, I guess you could advertise, but I don't know, I guess we can talk about it.
Okay, all right, and thank you so much for your time. Unlike the others, I'll urge you to wait if you can, give people more time. Okay, thank you.
Dan Hinckley, Small Point. I'm sorry to be the caboose here that keeps everybody riding. Evan, quickly, am I correct that the parcels maps for the town are not digitized? In other words, the parcels do not correspond with the actual physical surveys?
Hard for me to say, but when you look at a lot of the parcels, they don't line up in a way where you would.
Right.
So yeah, I would say that probably the whole thing is moved over 60 to 100 feet.
Right. I've done a bunch of mapping of the town. I got involved with the comp plan committee a while back assessing water use in the town and the water basins and water use in those basins. So I've used the town parcels a lot. They do not correspond. That map doesn't correspond with your actual property line. So if you look at the map and it draws a line through your parcel, you really are not going to be certain where it falls in your parcel because they're not digitized.
Not in the survey.
Yeah, I think
you can't afford to go out and do that. It's just
and I will look at it, but I think one of the, I don't know, I'm sure some remember Shirley Beals, but I remember Shirley Beals very adamantly saying that if you tried to survey the town of Phippsburg, it would stick another 2 or 3 miles up the street. And so it's, to say that you're digitize it and be accurate is going to be impossible.
All I'm saying is that people will get concerned as they look at your maps because you're voting on by map. And they're going to say, the map doesn't represent my lot. And physically, if you use that, the map, the parcels map, I can take the town data and parcels and lay it out on a GIS map, that's straightforward. But those parcels do not correspond physically to geolocated points in Phippsburg. So if you vote by the map, you are not corresponding the actual parcels to what your map purports to show.
I get it, but that's what you have now.
Well,
we're trying to start to correct that. It's going to take time, but ultimately that's what happens right now. You're dealing with that right now.
I understand that, but if you're voting it by map, people are going to say that doesn't correspond to my lot. So you're asking people to vote for something that does not correspond as a map to, if they walk out to their property with your map in hand, if you zoom in on it, you say that it's digitized on the site, you zoom in on it, it isn't going to correspond to their parcel on the surface of the earth. You're asking to vote on a map which is not actually orthographically accurate. Doesn't correspond to their parcels. So give it some thought. I don't know how you'll explain it. I don't know how you'll explain it. But you're asking people to vote on something which isn't accurate. That's the distance. You can get a tape measure and run it back, and that's accurate. But the map is not accurate.
We understand.
Okay, thanks for your patience.
I'll try and be brief, but one comment you made, John, is looking at the map online, and I'd like to ask the rest of the group, we've had a very hard time getting the proposed map online and keeping it through the town's website. Sometimes it shows up, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know if anyone else has had that problem, but no one's had that problem?
It's been easy.
All right, so maybe this is an elderly problem. But one other point, as a professional planner, I mentioned this earlier, the map as it is drawn is incoherent for people to determine what the shoreline is and what the setback is, because it simply can't be read when all water bodies, particularly freshwater bodies, are shown in the same color as the resource protection area. So I really do feel that if you want people to vote on this map, it has to be clear to people so they can read it.
Okay.
So I leave you with that.
We'll talk. I mean, yeah, I get that too. I actually was somewhat taken aback when there was a comment earlier about we flip colors. That's confusing to start with. And so, yeah, we'll talk about
The
it.
comparison with the 2015 map, which is clear, and the new map it's much more difficult to understand what's going on. And I know that some of the zones have changed, but it really should distinguish between what's water and what's shoreline and so on. Thank you.
We have, oh, sorry, I didn't see you coming.
Yes, my name is Suzanne Nussbaum, and I have spent 78 summers at Palm Beach. And my property is shown adjacent to Silver Lake. The property north of mine floods and is shown on this map as residential. That's a change from 2017, or the last map I think that you had. But you should look at the residential area on the north side of Silver Lake. You got areas that are residential that have never had a house on them. Thank you.
We had some people write to us who couldn't be here tonight. All I'm going to do is give you their name and the basic thought that they had. The first one is Bondi Hankin. Basically, hold back and study a little bit more. Next one is Rebecca Schultz. She says, no need to rush. Michael Foster, he also says, hold back. Darcy Hartland McGregor, she says, she's worried personally about not having enough land to rebuild houses that were on the property, and this is Popham Beach. She says that half of it is still zoned residential, which will allow her to build. If the land disappears, then she's hurting. Richard Smith, he would like zoning changes in his area. Dan Dowd wrote, and this was not for the land trust. He was just notifying people that this public meeting was going to happen, and if they wanted to say anything, come in. Okay, so I can thank everybody for coming and giving their opinions. Certainly we'll take it into consideration. I will say that we thought we were ready last January, and we did not get in the town report in time, apparently. So it has stretched on up until now. And when the town decided to have a town meeting, so naturally we brought our information in to be considered at this coming town meeting. It's not that we were trying to do it off-season, so to speak. It's just the time element. Okay, I think that ends the discussion on shoreline zoning amendments. So we will just move on to the next item. Somebody raised their hand back there.
I think we can kick the can down the road a long time and we should vote. That's my opinion.
I'm hearing.
Can't hear what you're saying.
Not here.
This is.
I think we can kick the can down the road a long time, and there's a lot of people paying thousands of dollars for their taxes. That should be allowed to properly do work on their trees. The point system leaves them evenly distributed, and anywhere on this map where there's a bog, and it's determined where that line is, we have to start the point system from there. And I've done that in all these other towns. And what you guys would be doing is matching the same rules that West Bath has, and Georgetown has, and Bath has, and none of those are severity. It's all done properly, when enforced. And I do believe it's our right to be able to do that. And I do understand water quality with even distribution of the trees in these plots. I think that, I think the vote should go forward. That's my opinion.
Okay, next item is presentation of a proposed land use ordinance amendment.
Yeah, but it's still number 4. We want to talk about the verbiage on Shoreland? Okay, hold on a minute. Little conversation going up here. We have 2 pieces of paper.
We have 2 pieces of paper. One is listed 1, 2, 3, and my own list doesn't match what the second piece goes for, so.
Take, I mean, we have updates.
Okay.
Would you like me to do that? I don't think so. Okay, but this is just Shoreland.
So, item number 4 on the agenda is the updates to the Shoreland ordinance. We really haven't done too many updates to that under the general building requirements. Section 16, item C, solar access. The note previous said solar devices are structures and must be met setbacks. We neglected to adjust that last year when we added the alternative energy ordinance, so we want to change that to refer to the alternative energy ordinance. Also, we want to delete the descriptions in the Shoreland zoning map descriptions at the end, the appendix. The next one is land use. Land use is the same reference to solar access, only that is section 10C. Oh, and in Shoreland, Shoreland, we're also adding under section 13, establishment of districts, A, resource protection. We didn't have the residential district listed in there, so we added that after village district. Yeah.
Don Kelly, Pleasant Cove Road. I just lost this, thank you. Is it true that is it?
We might have ran the battery.
It's been working really hard.
I think so.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. I'll use my cheerleader voice. It seems that by adding the residential district here, that it says that the district shall include the following areas when they occur within the limits of the shoreland zone, except those areas which are currently developed and areas which meet the criteria for the village district, residential district, or general development district need not be included within the resource protection district. So this seems to say that even if you've got green and yellow on your property, if you're developed, you don't have to worry about residential district?
That verbiage came directly from the template the state has for us, and Jeff Talmadge, our representative, said we needed to mirror that, or we should mirror that.
Okay, I would just think that in clarifying, you might say what this really means.
Okay, so, let me see, where am I? Land use was just the solar access,
So you don't have an answer for her question? Or did you answer her question and I didn't hear it?
Let me just also add the next sentence, because that's the clarifying one, which says, areas encompassed within the resource protection district shall be the actual area of floodplain, hydric soils, wetlands, natural sites, important wildlife habitat, etc., and no additional buffer is imposed. So this wording seems to say, if your map says it's shoreland zone and resource protection, you don't get a buffer for the shoreland zone. The only other issue that it brings up is what is currently developed. Is that there's a house on the lot, or does it have to be, you know, a very developed area? And I don't know the answers to those.
it's directly from the state.
So you don't know? And you're asking the town to vote on it? How smart is that?
All we're doing is adding research.
You're not doing anything if you don't know what it means.
Okay.
People came here to find out what it means. It was an information session.
What it means is Section 13A, Resource Protection District, in our present ordinance, all of the wording there is exactly the way it has been for quite some time. The one thing that the state wanted us to add in this list was a residential district. So that's why we're putting it in. All of the rest of it is wording that has been there right along.
Wording that you don't know what it means. All she asked is, what does this mean? That sounds like a simple question to me. None of the five of you can answer that question? She's asking what it means.
The first sentence says, the Resource Protection District includes areas in which development would adversely affect water quality, productive habitat, biological ecosystems, or scenic and natural values. Then it goes on to say what the district will include. The following areas, when they occur within the limits of the shoreland zone, exclusive of the stream protection district, and then except those areas which are currently developed and areas which meet the criteria for the village district, residential district, or general. So what they're saying is resource includes areas where development would adversely affect. But if you read a little bit farther on, it's exclusive of certain areas because they already have their own rules and regs. It's a convoluted sentence, to say the least, straight from the state. It has been here right along, and all we have done is add a residential district to the list of areas that occur within the limits of the shoreline zone and so forth.
It's really definitional.
That's all.
Yeah, it's not, I believe it's just, what they said to us is they want their definition very specifically in there, and we didn't have the residential, we didn't have the residential reference and they wanted it in. That's my understanding from being on the phone with them. But I'm not sure if that's exactly what you were saying, Marie, but that's my recollection of talking to the DEP.
For the specific item that I told you about, which is that there's a green sliver of resource in what is otherwise a residential area, this seems to me, from a straight reading of the words, to say there's no additional buffer imposed because of the resource protection district. It actually seems very straightforward. Areas encompassed within the resource protection district shall be the actual areas of floodplains, hydric soils, wetlands, natural sites, important wildlife habitat, etc. And no additional buffer zones are included.
Right, no additional buffer zones for basically they're saying there's their categories, whatever the hell they are, the 5 or 6, and no additional categories are included.
No, but I think your answer, I honestly don't remember reading that, but that is answering the question of we've been asking a long time or a while, is that little sliver. So like, because you have a little sliver doesn't mean you have to go back 75 or 100 feet. It just says that what's in the sliver is resource protection, and that's it.
That's what it seems to say, and I wouldn't mind if the state confirmed that they believe that as well, so we don't find ourselves in the same.
Right. No question. Thank you.
Done on the land use? Yeah, there was just that one. Okay, moving on. Whoops. I could probably call loud enough, but wouldn't be fair to you. The next item is presentation of a proposed alternative energy ordinance amendment, and Laurie has already read that off. It is the same. I think you didn't read it all. Oh, okay. I didn't get there. Oh, you didn't get there. Okay, we will continue with it. We are adding one sentence at the beginning of the long paragraph, which says, this section does not apply to a small-scale solar energy system, parentheses, SES, parentheses, as described in section 9A1. The whole section is 12D, decommissioning. It goes on to say all of the things that someone has to do in order to decommission a solar array. And it is performance bonds, security bonds, letter of credit, several other things, but it was intended for large arrays, not your average household. So that's why this sentence was supposed to be there. It wasn't. We are adding it now. Is that understood?
Yeah, it's an unfair
That
burden.
if you have a solar array on your house, this section does not apply to you. All right? Okay, I think we have tackled all three: shoreline zoning, land use, and alternate energy. Am I correct, folks?
I hope so.
All right. Being as this public hearing has served its purpose, I declare the hearing closed. It is 8:45. Thank you for taking the time to attend.
Thank you for your work.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Please.